Hey, Rob, it's so good to have you do this interview with me. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, John.
As I think about all the innovators involved in mission around the world and all the things that they're trying to accomplish and do, one of the things that's so critical, because most of us in mission did not train in innovation, right? That wasn't our background. A lot of us,
Exactly.
church planning, Bible translation, all these other things. And so innovation is this cool idea, but you're like, well, where do you start, right?
Yeah.
And so you've done something really cool as part of Pioneers, the Seeds Innovation Lab. I'd love for you just to maybe share for just a minute kind of what caused you to launch that lab.
Sure. Yeah. So at Pioneers, our six core value is innovation and flexibility. But if you asked most of us, anyone, in the field or here in the office, what is innovation? How do you do it? You would get 3,200 different definitions of innovation, and you'd have probably that many different ways of doing innovation. It's like, hey, if Bob and Sue, in Kazakhstan have a great idea, we kind of let them try it. And so we knew that we needed a bit more around that. We needed to create a framework. So we needed a shared language to be able to communicate well around innovation, but we also needed some tools, some processes around that as well. And then lastly, when we started this process, we did a lot of training. We brought some people in that educated us. And during that process, John, we discovered that we were the greatest obstacle to innovation ourselves, really because of the human condition.
Sure.
And so we called the lab Seeds based off of John 12:24, where Jesus says, unless a kernel of wheat fall to the ground and die, it remains only a single seed, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. So we would say that innovation begins with death because of our human condition, our habitual ways of thinking and doing and sort of judging and assuming and trying to move old ideas into future, like potential ideas. And so when we look at innovation, or the coin, if you will, we say, okay, on one side are our mindsets and postures, on the other side are the tools and language. So I can have the tools and language of innovation, but if I don't have the right mindset, then it's like handing a chainsaw to a child. They've got the right tool to cut the tree down, but
right.
Something else, maybe a foot is probably coming off because they don't have the
right
mindset.
Chainsaw. Yeah, that's not.
Me too. I don't touch them. I will not touch them. But we think it's important. We don't think you can de-link the tools and language from the way we think, our mindsets and postures. So we did a lot of work around the human condition, and not like proof texting scripture into different processes, but just saying what's a biblical sort of posture that we need to have to approach innovation and what God is doing in our organizations. And so that's sort of what we started with, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love how you have those two sides of the coin, because we all know that it's not only about the tools, it's also about the approach we bring to it, our mentality, our ways of thinking about things. I think one of the things that I talk a lot to people about, and I'd love your perspective on it, Rob, before we jump into some of the things that Seeds is doing. Why do you think at this moment in the history of global mission, why do you think innovation is really needed? What do you think is driving the need, and why do you think it's really critical right now?
Yeah, there are probably 100 answers, right? So I'd say number one is this idea of change. So we all know the world is changing at an exponentially rapid rate. Some of you are probably familiar with Moore's Law or Martek's Law, and it's this idea that everything is changing so fast. Obviously, technology is kind of the foundation of much change, but it has a ripple effect into everything: society, culture, values, beliefs. And so if I think typically organizations and NGOs often do this as well, as we create a strategy and we run it over a period of years. Like, what's your 5-year strategy, your 10-year strategy? And it's linear. The process is because the problem is because the world is changing so fast, that strategy loses its efficacy over a couple years, because the strategy was designed based on what the world looked like here. But that strategy doesn't work anymore here, because think of like a hockey puck curve, right? Sort of some changes happening and now it's vertical. Yeah. So I think change is number one. We're perpetuating these outdated paradigms, and we've got to figure out how to connect in real time, all the time, with those we serve. So we think of strategy as innovation as a strategy. So we think of it as short iterative loops, not a linear process. So staying connected all the time. So change is number one. I think disruption is number two. And it's not just the disruption that happens to us from the outside world, and we see that happening all around us, but it's also our capacity to disrupt, our capacity to engage in something that's very novel for our organization. So I think that's really important to understand, that it's not just about change, but it's also there are things that can happen to us in the context of disruption. I think effectiveness is a third reason. How do we remain effective to the vision and mission God's given us when we're in such a state of inflection in the world? Everything is moving and changing, and so if we're going to remain effective, we cannot continue to do what we've been doing, delivering old ways or models or what have you, whether it's processes, products, services, in the way we've done. We've got to be capable of understanding how do we engage outside of our sort of core operation. I think that's really hard, right? We spend 110% in the core, but we don't really know how to innovate outside of the core to be effective. And then I'd say the last reason is this idea of creation. God's designed us not to create something and then just sort of wrap arms around it as an owner and run it into perpetuity. God has designed us with creative capacities, being made in the image of God. So I think we're naturally bent toward that. Often the structures we live in and the organizations we work in, they just want efficiency. But I think we need to tap into how God's designed us. So those are reasons that I think are really important as to why we need to be thinking about innovation and not just waiting for something to happen to us.
No, good inputs, Rob. And I think every one of those ones that you just described, we could all think of examples of those things in our minds just real quick as you were talking, right? In each of our organizations and each of our ministries or departments where we're seeing those things happening and not always knowing how to respond, right? And I think because we don't necessarily have the background in innovation or deep, innovation budgets and strategies and teams, all around the world in ministry, a lot of times we don't know where to start. And I think one of the things that I've watched you do really well is really do this kind of iterative testing of how would we help ministries to figure out how to do this. I wonder if maybe you could talk for just a little bit about, kind of what you've been offering through Seeds. And how you've been kind of iterating with it and kind of where you are now with what you're offering. And we're going to provide, with this video, also links to all the things you're going to mention so that people can go check them out after they watch the video.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So Seeds has been up and running for a little over 3 years. So we spent about a year, again, just kind of deep dive learning, training, a lot of education, formal, informal, looking at, again, scripture, like how does this apply to ministry? Is it the same? Is it different, et cetera? We spun up the lab and just sort of hung up a shingle. I really don't think anybody ever went to our website the first year or two, no joke. But we started getting calls from folks saying, hey, can you help us with innovation, right? And this is pre-pandemic. So we started running projects, right? We were big fans of design thinking. Obviously, there are a lot of innovation models that are excellent: Lean, Scrum, Agile, Waterfall, et cetera, et cetera. We like design thinking because it's a low barrier, easy entry tool that anybody can use. So we started facilitating projects for either individual teams or entire organizations around very specific challenges. That's what we started doing. And then I thought, hey, we could kind of underwrite our budget a little bit. So we created a pay-for-service model. So we started charging, outside organizations, both for-profit and non-profit organizations, to help them with projects, run projects where we facilitate those. But we learned, John, quickly that when organizations would leave, they really struggled on the back end of innovation, with the change management, with incorporating that into the overall strategy, again, sort of innovating outside the core, right? They really struggled in those areas. So we thought, wow, what if we created sort of an education arm? We consider ourselves a teaching lab. And so while we were doing teaching in that process of facilitating a project, we thought, let's create something a bit more formal. So yes, we do and have facilitated numbers of projects around simple and complex challenges. But then we started creating some coursework. So we started this first course called Innovation Essentials. It's a big course. It covers a lot. It's a whole week long. And, we do it here in the lab. We've done it at other locations as well around the world. And it covers everything from innovation basics, definition, design thinking, application, some change management, sort of closing that gap between innovation and strategy, like I mentioned. Covers a lot. Covers stuff on like diffusion of innovation theory. How do we create a culture of innovation in the organization? We talk about personas. How do you deal with team members who don't want to innovate and team members that do want to innovate? So we did that, and then COVID hit. And we had some ministries overseas that said, hey, how can you help us remote, now that you can't come here and deliver that course? So we rapid prototyped a course in 2 weeks. We grabbed our iPhones and we started filming an entire course on our phone, and we gave it to this ministry. And we're like, here, try that. And then they liked it. We tried it with several other ministries over a summer. And then we created a course called DTI, Design Thinking for Innovation. It's a virtual course.
And I took that one, and it was really a huge help.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember we did that together about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. So it's a great course. It's design thinking, and it goes through things like, questioning our assumptions and framing problems well, and then looking at design thinking process. A little homework. It's not hard. It's pretty short. It's in a month. We do it in a month. Since you took it, John, we've converted it to where it's not facilitated by a facilitator. You can now take it online, and it's 4 weeks long, but it's self-guided, and it has a downloadable PDF you can print, or you can QR code your phone to have the PDF on your phone and go through that as you're watching videos. So it's super simple. You log in, you've got your coursework there. But what's great about that course is you do it individually, but we have a leader's guide as well. So you could facilitate your team through that course. So they would do part of it themselves, and then you have discussion questions that you would do every week for 4 weeks with your team. That's called DTI, Design Thinking for Innovation. Then, like I mentioned before, we talk about mindsets and postures. We said, well, we really need to do something virtual around mindsets and postures. So we just finished a course like a month ago called Mindsets and Postures. And it goes through the 6 mindsets and postures of innovation that we think are paramount. Things like generativeness, perseverance, stewardship, curiosity, abundance, and humility.
Wow.
And that's about, each section is about 12 to 15 minutes long, and it's got a robust downloadable PDF as well, same format as DTI. So we were charging for these courses, but as you know, John, we are really big into creating an innovation ecosystem that sort of creates that virtuous network effect. So we want to serve the global missions community. Our vision is to equip the global missions community for the emerging world. So just recently, we decided to sort of open source our content and give it away. So folks can go online and sign up for DTI, Design Thinking for Innovation, and they can take that course, download everything, reuse it, use it in their organizations. Same thing with mindsets and postures. So those courses are both now available. And if somebody gets stuck, just email us. We're happy to get on a call and do office hours. If there's something they're stuck with, or if they want more help around, other issues that are outside of those courses. So those 2 courses are available. The third, Innovation Essentials, is also available. That's a robust course. Like I said, it's a week long. We do still charge for that just because it's so much of a commitment from our organization to pull off. We are thinking, as I mentioned before, about shortening that to like 3 days, cutting the price down by maybe 50% or something. So to be able to make it more accessible to the community. And then 2 more things we're working on right now, John, is we're looking at a culture of innovation assessment tool. So we would create this tool. It would be online, and it's not necessarily exclusively for the C-suite, but it's for leaders of organizations to say, hey, is our organization capable of tapping the collective intelligence of everybody here to see an actual culture, right? Values and beliefs of innovation permeate the whole organization. So it's a tool you would take. We're going to offer for free. You can go down and take the assessment, then it spits out a bit of a report saying, hey, you're doing really good in these areas. Maybe you need to strengthen these areas here. So that's a tool we're hoping will be available and online in the next probably 2 to 4 months, maybe. And then lastly, this will take a little more time, but in talking to end users, we've discovered, John, that a lot of folks just don't have the capacity to have somebody facilitate a project, right? A design thinking innovation project. So we're in the works right now. We've just started prototyping a tool. I wouldn't call it a course. We don't know what it is yet. That's why it's a prototype, to basically give out to people, teams on the field, teams and organizations, C-suite, whomever, a way that they can go online or have something printed or on an app, who knows what. And actually, they themselves can facilitate an innovation process with their team or organization. So think of like a Sherpa guide. These are the steps you take. This is what you're going to do at each step. And this is what the leader does at each one of those stage gates throughout the entire process. So we're working on that right now as well. That'll be free for the community. So we've pivoted quite a bit because we really didn't want to create any types of constraints, especially financial burdens for organizations that might say, hey, we really want to do this, but we can't send people through that because of cost. So again, we've sort of open sourced much of this.
Well, I like your suite of resources, Rob, because you've got the two core tools, the two core courses, one on the tools side, one on the posture side, and then you've got this assessment around culture. One of the things that I'm working on a lot these days is how do you assess a culture of innovation in an organization, and it is such a huge challenge because there's no one that would say, oh, I'm not innovative or I don't care about innovation. That doesn't mean they have a culture of innovation, right? And so how do you pierce that and understand, okay, is the culture of your organization truly friendly to new ideas and hospitable to new endeavors? And I think a lot of times we would find that we're not nearly as hospitable to those ideas as we wish we were, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that goes back to the mindsets and postures, right? Fear, positioning, posturing, like fear of what people are going to think, fear of failure, expectations, et cetera, et cetera. That's exactly right. And so I think that culture piece it's paramount to address. We don't see this lab as a place people need to come to. We just try to use it to catalyze innovation outward for this organization and others. We don't want to isolate it into a room with a whiteboard. That's a huge mistake.
And this is one of the big challenges, right, that we're having is that so many times in a world that has in many ways professionalized in mission, there's a sense, oh, innovation must be for that professional over there that went to the course or that something. But what I think is so critical to truly seeing innovation happen in mission is that everyone can see that I could do this if I give it the time, energy, and discipline. It's something that I can practice as well. I mean, I may not be the most creative person in the world, but that doesn't mean I can't practice the innovation discipline.
No, you're absolutely correct. And I've been in trouble for saying this before, but I'll say it again because I think it's important. We often Okay, sorry about that. We got cut off, but let me just continue what I was saying. What I was saying was we often say the closer you are to the top, the further you are from the truth. People at the top don't like hearing that a lot, but the fact of the matter is if you're serving people directly, your end users and customers, you have a better understanding of their needs, or you at least have a higher capacity to understand their values and beliefs and needs than some of the other folks. And so, yeah, we think innovation needs to be really pushed to the fringes of the organization. Just to agree with what you're saying, John.
Yeah, no, thanks I love that. I love that little pithy phrase. Can you say that again, just so that people hear that?
Yeah, we say the closer you are to the top, the further you are from the truth. And I've said that at some meetings, just sharing about what we're doing with different organizations. Some people love it, but I've had some real hard pushback on that too from the C-suite. But the fact of the matter is, listen, if we trust the role of the Holy Spirit in everybody, let's give them the tools and equip them with some mindsets that are helpful, and let them go out and have the mindsets of somebody who's a scientist, experimenting and prototyping ideas and really co-creating with those people they serve. There's no better person to do it than those folks.
That's right. And nothing can beat that time with those that you serve, right? That the interviews and spending time with your customers, with your beneficiaries, with your partners, with that audience that you're bringing the gospel to in whatever way that's happening. You can't beat that time together as far as designing new solutions and innovating. So
yeah, you can't do it through a survey. I'll just say that we think data is awesome. We love data, but we also think it's incomplete. We you know, the data gets you some framing of what it helps you do some sense making, and you can kind of frame a problem a little bit, but data doesn't get you a solution. It's what you just described that gets you closer to a solution. We're looking for data with a soul, and that's where empathy and engagement really, you know, get us that data with a soul. Yeah, you've got to go face to face.
that's right. That's right. Well, Rob, thanks so much for taking this time, and thanks so much for offering the resources you guys are offering to the kingdom. What a blessing, and really appreciate all that you guys do.
We are so excited to do it. And thanks for sharing to your community, John. Really grateful for you and for your ability or desire to be able to do that. We love that.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, John.